simple as submitting a help desk ticket. And thanks for starting the recording, Andrew. I appreciate that. So if you don't have these, if you are a desktop user and you don't have these SDE database connections that I'm going to show you right now, then you can submit a help desk ticket for these to be loaded onto your computer. We have two different SDE database connections. We connect to the state agency database connection, and that has various information in there for statewide programs outside of TDEC even. So where you might find some of this information valuable are, for instance, we have city administrative boundaries here in the state SDE database. And so if I just go ahead and quickly drag those in, that's how you would add a data source from that SDE database from the state agency. Those quickly populate, et cetera. You can do querying, mapping, that sort of thing with those sorts of layers. If we go back to catalog here, I'm going to close the state agency one or collapse it. We also have the TDEC GIS SDE. So this will be much more specific to our program areas. We'll have information from Parks and Conservation side of the house, as well as the Bureau of Environment. And so you'll see information about, waters of the state, the assessment criteria for those waters, landfill bound or landfill points, and many other different things are the park boundaries are also within here. So those are the areas where you can add information from those, add data sources from those SDE databases. You'll also notice that you have access to folder drives, and you can create new folder connections by right-clicking on that. And so you would be able to add data sources that are specific or loaded directly on your machine or on a network drive, for instance, those sorts of things. All right, we're going to hop out of desktop software.
Hey, real
Go
quick,
ahead.
do you mind going
Yep,
back to that for a second? So
most
you
definitely.
mentioned that we have to be on the state network for, just in case that there's people completely new to this, how does one get on the state network? Probably all familiar with it, but what would you do? Would you open up Pro first and then get on the state network, or would you want to open the state network first before you start doing a project? What do you usually do?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andrew. So our license connections are generally do require the network connection. And so that would require you to connect to VPN to establish that VPN connection and connection to the network so that that license would become valid. We run what's called a concurrent licensure program. And so not to get into all the weeds of it, but you need to be connected to the network so that your licensing will work for the software. So I always connect to VPN first, then open Pro, and then connect to the databases. And the same is true for the connection to the databases themselves. Even if you are outside of Pro, you would have to be connected to the network. So very important to go ahead and get connected to the network, be on VPN, and then start working through everything else.
Awesome, thanks. That clears it up for me.
Yeah, most definitely. Thanks for clarifying that. The next section, I just want to do kind of a quick run through of how you would map and use mapping tools on the web using web map viewers. And so I was going to work through an example using Smart Parks Hub data. And so if we were interested in, for instance, looking at information for trails that were at state parks, let's just use this as a use case. So here on the Smart Parks Mapping Hub, they have access to all the publicly available data. I think Andrew might go over this in a little bit more detail in just a second. To show this workflow, I would first be interested in looking at the park boundaries. So I want to access that data layer. I'm kind of going a little fast. Let me slow down. So I'm going to go to the park boundaries data layer. And once it opens that item in a viewer, it's going to kind of give me a default view of this, but I can't really interact too much with this data using these tools over here. So what I really want to do is open this data in a web mapping viewer. So I want to use this. I'm going to create a map, and I want to use this ArcGIS map viewer tab to go ahead and open this and create a kind of a customized map using that data source in a web map viewer. So first, there's some other tips and tools if you need information about how to get started in this platform, that'll be available. Now that we have those state parks loaded, I'm interested in gaining more information about the trails, but I don't want to just do that same exact thing that I just did where I'm opening that data source directly in a map viewer. What I want to do is add that data source to this web map. And so I'm going to go back to the Smart Parks Mapping Hub. I'm going to go back to all the awesome data sets that you guys have. And I'm going to pick out the public trails data set. And instead this time, instead of me going to create a new map, what I'm going to do is, and I could do this a couple of different ways. If I look at the API resources, it gives me a URL that references this item. I could directly copy that, which is actually the URL that I'm going to use. But you can also view this data source in a new tab, and it'll actually open a REST service reference. We're going to talk a little bit more about REST services here in just a moment. So I've already copied that feature ID, the URL for this feature class, and I'm going to go back over to my map where I've already loaded my Tennessee State Park boundaries, and I want to add another layer. And I want to add this layer from a URL. So I'm going to paste that right in. It's already recognizing it as an ArcGIS server web service. And I'm just going to say add that to the map. So now I've got all the park boundaries and all the trails. And let's just say that I'm interested in one of our newest state parks. So I'm going to come down here to Savage Gulf and start to kind of tool around and look at the information. Well, what if I'm interested in a little bit more detail as far as this elevation map goes beyond what the base map is providing? So what I'm going to do here is actually connect to an external REST service to show another example of how to connect to a REST service. And I'm going to go to USGS's terrain REST service, their image server for their 3-depth LiDAR data. And I'm just going to copy this URL for this image service. I'm going to go back to my image server. I'm going to add another layer from the URL, from a URL. And I'm going to go ahead and paste in USGS's image server for the 3-depth data, or LiDAR, as it's available for this state anyways. And now it's going through and creating that. And then if I come back here, now my 3-depth layer is it's obscuring everything else, but I can go ahead and drag it below so that I can have my other stuff on top. And now I can really see a whole lot of detail. So even if I were, coming all the way down here to camp at Sawmill and Savage Gulf, well, the water source over here I know is Schwoon Spring. But you can actually see the actual natural indentation of that cave feature here. So just kind of a neat way to look at not only adding internal data sources, but using external data sources as well. I guess, Andrew, after those couple of examples, do you have some more information that you might want to share as far as Smart Parks Hub or web mapping uses for parks?
Sure. Where are you going to go after this part? Are you going to talk? What's the?
I think the only thing that I really had to go on next was to sign in and show people. Well, for instance, I guess I could just go through that real quick and then
Go for it.
Leave the rest of the time to you after that.
Sounds
So
good.
you'll notice there, since I went back through and tried to
You have
refresh my
to,
browser, that it
you have
didn't
to
save.
reshare again. Yeah,
Oh,
reshare the.
thank you.
There you go.
Perfect. Thanks for keeping me in line. So now that I refreshed my browser, I actually lost some data that I was already adding. I'm going to kind of cheat and hop over where I've already added that the trails data. But one other thing to consider at this point is that I'm not currently signed in to ArcGIS Online. So if you have an ArcGIS Online account, at this point, what you would want to probably do is to sign in, and then you can save this map so that it actually creates this map in your content so that you would be able to then reference that later or add more data sets, build on the map, use it for other purposes, and be able to reference it again and again instead of having to rebuild it every single time. So there's that consideration. Andrew, do you want to take it back over to your side now?
Sure. That sounds good. All right. So one of the things you want to talk about for that's a little bit different in most of the state parks, I'd say like 80 to 90% of the users for state parks and conservation, maybe more like 80%, are just mobile users that don't have ArcGIS Pro or ArcMap and desktop. And so you guys are more like using it on your phone and using it online on the computer. So one way to look at the data, as we talked about, is through our Smart Parks Data Viewer. And that is basically a cleaned up version of the 30 or 40 layers that we think are useful. It's like historic data or our statewide one smart park layers that you are contributing to. But we also have, like, within the content of our organization, you know, like I might have a couple of thousand features that are on here. And if you were to go and search for content and you just said the word parks, like, oh, I want to find stuff about parks, it's going to pull up a lot of different things. So that's why it's helpful. 985 files that are related to parks because someone tagged them as parks. So one thing, as Brian said, you can go to our public portal, or you can look for things that say like authoritative. And those are the ones that we've marked as the best ones to use. So whether it's the state park points or boundaries, maybe I'll do campsites and see what happens. Okay, you see when you do campsites, here's another one that's marked as authoritative. So that's the one to use versus any of these old ones that are part of just doing processes and stuff. Or if you created one, this is going to be the statewide layer. So I wanted to show you guys that. If you look on the Smart Parks Data Viewer, and as we zoom in, you can see all the ones that we have available. So these might be good ones to try to search in the browser. Remember, if you're using the Smart Parks Data Viewer, you're not really making a map. You can print off the view, but next time you sign back in, it's not going to hold any of the information that you did or your drawings. So that's when you want to make a custom map in Web Map Viewer. So you might want to look for these layers. So here's an interesting one, trail planning. So I'll go back to here and I'm going to search in my content call and say trail planning to see what comes up. Me and Leah are going to do a better job about marking these as authoritative as they get built out. But if you click on it, it's going to allow you to look at the full item details. And just like we did before, you can open this in the map viewer and we'll see the trails that have been added through trail planning right now. This is a really new layer, so there's might not be too much there. So I'm like, wait, has anything been done on this yet? I'm kind of confused. It looks pretty blank. One way you can look at stuff before you even open it is to go onto the data page that's here. And so now you can see, okay, actually there have been 17 features that have been added here. Looks like mostly at Cordell Hall in South Cumberland. They've been doing it, and also Port Royal. I think Leah was over there doing some work recently. And you know what? We can actually kind of see who was the editor on these. Really cool. And so using these tabs lets you kind of get a first look at what this stuff looks like. And so now if I go back to the map, I knew that that stuff was happening over at Cordell Hall. So let's zoom on over here. Come on, Cordell, where you at? There we are. Okay, cool. So we did a loop that goes to the cave trail and the new storybook trail here. That's great. One other thing is, so we're looking for data here, and we're mostly thinking that it's in map terms, but you might just want an Excel report. Maybe you want to say, show your manager, like, I mapped this many trails and this amount of distance this year. And rather than like showing a map of what that looks like, you can use the export data function. So for the majority of the stuff that's on ArcGIS Online, you could export this to an Excel sheet or to KML. So imagine if you're working with people who are more into using like Google Earth and things like that, you might want to send them a KML. Or maybe you're working with a graphic designer to make a new sign and they need a shape file of just your park, or even like marketing or something. If you're not using Leah and I for your services, or if you're in a different division, you can export just a plain shape file or any of these other types of features. These are good to get familiar with the different types and what they can do without having to even open a map. So you can get that file locally on your computer. So again, yeah, you have a lot of stuff that's in your content that's available, and stuff that you create will start to show up here. And I think that covers most of the stuff. So yeah, you can look for here, and also you might add stuff from the Living Atlas, which is a great place to add stuff that's non-state park related. And you can go to Living Atlas. I might want to find let's see, census data. That's a random one, but population, yeah, redistricting blocks or population. And you could find out what are the what's the population close by to your parks or something like that. So tons and tons of data on Living Atlas too. And the idea is to combine stuff that's been curated by your division with stuff that you create with our overall TDEC layers, and then stuff that comes from outside sources like that 3-depth hillshade. That was really cool. Anything else you think I can cover, Brian?
No, that was perfect, Andrew. I was wondering what kind of tool do you use when you're collecting track data for trails like that? Are you guys like streaming using a Survey 123 tool or some other GPS? Like how are you
Yeah.
collecting those those lines?
Yeah, this is now through the One Smart Park ArcGIS field map. And so for the most part, they're just collecting a general line using the trail planning layer, which is a line feature, and then streaming their location as they go along. And one thing we like to do with trails and stuff is we know that it's not going to be completely perfect when you're using just your phone or an offline map. Sometimes it's better to use like a GPS or something, but it gets us a good idea. When we make a new park trail map, you guys, we can find, me and Leah can get this data really fast now, because as soon as it's collected on your phone, it shows up on the database compared to having to send an Avenza GPX track or something. And the accuracy between Avenza and ArcGIS field maps we found to be about the same. And so it's, plus or minus 5 feet difference. And what happens when we make a new trail map is we usually smooth this line anyways to get rid of jaggedness. And if you stop to tie your shoe for a second and there's like some scattering going on or collected a signal way far away, me and Leah do some like QC cleanup to smooth this line and get a general idea. The point of people who are out there hiking is to be able to know like where in general they are along the trail, not like it's not used for like planning for accessibility and making sure it's staying on the right exact slope. So that's just some things. And that was a really cool thing is if you do want to pull in things like slope or aspect, you can get a slope layer easily added. So if you do want to do some trail planning, it's pretty amazing. The slope layer that comes from Living Atlas, lots of good slope, and then same with aspect as well. And you could always change these colors to represent something different. So there's some fun layers out there on our hub page, on our resources. We've made a little document that's it says Living Atlas layers of interest. We've shown this in other demos too, but just a couple layers that we find interesting. So if you ever want to pull these up, you can bring them in by searching or as a REST service, which Brian has talked about. So lots of fun stuff in there.
Very cool. Yeah, I love all the resources you guys have put together for web mapping. That's perfect.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
Andrew.
you.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're ready to jump into our first presentation now, I believe. So our first presentation will be by Sam King from the Division of Natural Areas, and we'll be looking at how DNA at Cedars, Lebanon is using GIS to identify potential high conservation impacts and restoration. Sam, if you're ready, we'll go ahead and key you up.
There we go. Sorry, when I went into presentation mode, I lost my mute button. Well, thanks for letting me talk. And I'll dive right in and try and get through this pretty quick. But we're going to look at how we've used some of the GIS data to make decisions about when and how to implement some grant money that we received. There. Are the slides advancing for y'all?
Not yet. I'm still seeing the title slide currently.
There we go.
Perfect. Yep, I
All
see
right.
it.
So this is Cedars of Lebanon State Natural Area. It's 2,690 acres. It's contiguous with Cedars of Lebanon State Park and Cedars of Lebanon State Forest, and altogether that comes to about 10,000 acres. But we're going to focus on this designated natural area. It's about 25 miles east of Nashville. For those familiar with the area, you can see 840, State Route 840 up there in the corner. So why and what was this project? The year was 2020, and we had just been awarded a grant from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to do some habitat restoration work. Also in 2020, I had signed up for using the fee waiver, a GIS class at ETSU. And so this project is kind of the happy crossing paths of circumstances. And so decided to use this new grant that we had just got to look at, see if we can come up with a good like spatial decision-making tool. Because this restoration work is expensive and we didn't have nearly enough money to do the whole property. So we had to kind of look at where our priority areas would be. There's several endangered species that we were looking at. And had to decide where to do that work. So here's what that work looks like. There in the red circle, that's a cedar glade. That's the true glade, shallow limestone outcrops, not much growing there. And then surrounding those, kind of in that yellow rectangle, we have barren areas where there is enough soil to support tree growth, but unimpeded tree growth shades out these rare plants that we're trying to manage. So imagine this site completely forested. It's very expensive and time consuming to remove the trees and get back to this state. So that's kind of the prioritization that we needed to do. So we looked back in 2003, TDEC employees had gone all over Cedars of Lebanon in the early days of handheld GPS, all points, no polygons, and they had made notes of anything they found that was interesting. Caves, sinkholes, rare plants, animals, salamander occurrences, and they noted areas that they thought would be good restoration sites, but they only existed as points. So the goal of this project was to convert those points into a meaningful polygon. We used those 14 restoration points identified in 2003. We also pulled data from NRCS and looked at soil types to see if that was meaningful, as well as our rare species occurrences. And then because you saw that rocky habitat, we decided to look at a vegetation index. We used the NDRE from Landsat. So this is kind of how the project started out. Those are those points of interest that our colleagues had said would be good restoration potential in the future. And we need to convert those to polygons. So the first thing we did was lay those out on the NRCS soil map, clip to the Cedars of Lebanon boundary, and look and see if there was anything meaningful. And since I assume there's somebody on the meeting today that loves soils, these are the two soils that we were dealing with. Gladeville, think bad soil. That's doesn't grow well. And then the Talbot soils are the deeper and can support tree growth. And when we dropped those restoration points onto the map, we saw that most of them are occurring in the Gladeville soils. So the poor soils looked like good restoration potential sites to them in 2003. So if we're trying to come up with a decision-making tool, our first rule would be that our priority areas should be within the Gladeville soils. Next, we compared that vegetation index, which looks at the reflectance from Landsat. It's similar to the NDVI, the differential vegetation index, but it switches out a couple of bands. And it really popped better than that index for us. You can see here, it's counterintuitive. Areas that are green do not support vegetation. You can see the interstate up in the top left-hand corner. You can see a parking lot there on the right-hand side. And scattered throughout Cedars of Lebanon, those yellow and green areas are shallow soils, very rocky and not supporting much plant growth, where the darker red is where we have a more vigorous vegetation layer. So we put that on top of the soil layers, and you can see that those darker red, healthier vegetation areas line up with the Talbot soils, and the less vigorous plant growth which is more tied to cedar glades, is going to be on the gladeful soils. So the next thing we did was look at our rare species records and see how they plot against all this other data. So we pulled those in from the TDEC hub. And the first thing we did was clean that up a little bit. We removed all animals and non-vascular plants. Now that looks like this. We could also filter by life history and focused on those plants needing full sun. There are some forest plants that we track like ginseng, and we pulled those out of this data set and really only did those cedar glade plants that need full sunlight. We then threw those out onto that soil map that we were already using, and you can see that most of those rare plant records are on or very near the gladeful soils, which is that kind of rose pink color. So from there, we can tell that areas with less vegetation health, one, have more of those rare species, and two, line up with the gladeful soils. So where do we go from here? This map has both the points of interest and the rare species that we're interested in. So we need to start thinking about how we're going to put polygons that would encompass those two things. Polygons really need to include both the restoration points and the element occurrences. So what we did was do an intersect between our element occurrences, or those rare species, with a buffer, as well as the points of interest with a buffer, and the gladeful soils. And what you see here in red are where all three of those things intersect. So that would be kind of the objective way to look at where we should start spending this grant money. Now, land management is not always objective. So we also did kind of a subjective version where we laid out the points. You can't see it here, but we looked at satellite imagery and tried to encompass some things, and hand drew in red our top priorities and in yellow our second priorities, about where we wanted to spend the money. And then when we laid the objective and the subjective over each other, you can see there was actually a whole lot of overlap. And so we focused on those areas of overlap for our top priorities and started management in 2021. That management looked like this: going in, removing trees, which with heavy equipment sounds, very, very heavy-handed or potentially detrimental to a site. But you can see there, that second picture, that's a young oak tree, and we told the machine operator to save us as many oak trees as they could. So they are even down to about 1.5 inches diameter. He was able to avoid damaging those. And then we came back and burned later. And we're still kind of in the final stages of this. The grant runs through the end of 2023. But so far, we're seeing pretty good results in these areas. We'll know more after a couple of growing seasons to see what bounces back after the mulch and litter is burned off the sites. And this is kind of our desired end state. Nice site, lots of wildflowers. You can see the trees that are left. The cedar trees are kind of stressed out, but our oak trees seem to be doing all right. This is at another nearby natural area where we've implemented this work at a smaller scale. And then thanks to everybody that helped on this project. I know I talked fast. I'd be happy to answer any questions or turn it back over to Brian and Andrew.
Thanks so much, Sam. Yeah, that was an awesome project. Really interesting the way that you went about it and everything. I was wondering, have you seen patterns in the biodiversity data as to whether or not those center around sink points? I had seen an article that was published by someone in the karst community where they talked about sinkholes being biodiversity hotspots due to their unique conditions with regard to climate and those sorts of things. Have you noticed those patterns in your guys' data, specifically to sinks?
I haven't noticed a broad pattern. It'd definitely be a question for like Todd or Caitlin in our group. I do know that there's a lot of biodiversity centered around sinkholes. with this project, we're focused more on those sun-loving plants, which are not located around the sinkholes. Those tend to be in the more mesic and forested areas. So I just don't know off the top of my head if there's a pattern. I know there are species that we track that turn up a lot near sinkholes, but I'm not sure if that can be extrapolated broadly.
Cool. Well, yeah, thanks for the answer and very interesting GIS analysis. Does anybody else have any other questions? Let's see, Andrew's got his hand raised.
Yeah, Sam, I got just a hypothetical question. If someone gave you a magic hard drive full of every GIS layer that you would want that would be helpful for natural areas statewide, what would be some things on that?
Oh man, some of the layers and the data sets that I use most often for management decisions, we look at the soil layer from NRCS a lot, so I definitely would want that. And then some of the land fire data that the Nature Conservancy has put together, looking at like historic fire regimes, and that's a big point of emphasis for us, is restoring a fire regime in the way that it should be, looking at both the intensity and the frequency of fire on the landscape, and not over or underdoing it when we reintroduce fire. So soils and fire are probably two of the biggest ones for me.
Very cool. Awesome. Thanks for sharing all this stuff with us today. It's really cool to see another application of it.
Yeah, it's a little intimidating because it definitely, just took one class one time, and this is the GIS working group, so it's intimidating, but a lot of fun.
Yeah, what are some things that you think help you and your staff continue to learn? Like, what are some resources? Do you go online, Google things, YouTube videos, reach out to colleagues at other places? What are some of the things you guys do to keep on the toe? I know you got people who know QGIS and stuff in your group. What are things you guys do?
For me and for the natural areas folks, a lot of times it's rolling our chair across over to our heritage colleagues and asking, hey, how do I know you can do this? How do you do it? And for me, that's more helpful than like when I'm at home by myself and have to Google something and watch a YouTube video. I definitely get to the same spot, but being able to ask, a friend and a colleague how to do it is definitely a big bonus.
Sam, I really like how you incorporated that remote sensing data and the red edge. Do you think, and this was probably more as a result of you being involved, academically and looking for a unique project, but I guess from a environmental regulatory or an environmental, sustainability standpoint, do you see, I guess, with the advancement of a lot of those tools and sensors and just the availability of data for remote sensing that we're seeing nowadays, do you see those types of tools being more firmly incorporated into workflows for environmental resource protection and evaluations?
I think so. It was definitely like my choice to use that particular index and those bands was influenced by the assignment. But like the NDVI, we use pretty regularly. There's some other ones that, based on reflectance, you can pick up on water that you wouldn't see, from the actual satellite imagery. And you're looking at different reflectance things and like, oh, there's a small pond there that I wouldn't have realized, or the stream channel does something a little different right there than I would have thought just by looking at the image. So like there's definitely a place for those data in decision making for resource management.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that perspective. It's pretty fascinating nowadays with not only multispectral, but hyperspectral really honing in on specific signatures for vegetation and those sorts of things. So just really interested to see how the field continues to expand and become more economical for all use cases.
Definitely. And like even getting to the point where you can identify individual tree species almost in a canopy, which is like amazing to think about, that might be just a normal thing to do one day.
Heck yeah. And thanks, Todd, for the other feedback with regard to biodiversity in karst areas. That's really interesting. I can send you guys that PDF for the other publication I was talking about if you guys are interested.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
Awesome. Well, I guess we're ready to transition. Unless anybody else has any more questions, we'll leave it open for just 1 second in case anybody wants to raise their hand. Heck yeah, well, round of applause for you, Sam. That was an awesome presentation. Really appreciate that.
Oh, thanks. I enjoy doing it.
Heck yeah. Keep up the great work. Very good. Well, we'll move into our next presentation. This is Steve Owens in the Division of Water Resources with the Subsurface Sewage Disposal System program. And he'll be talking about deploying ESRI solutions to optimize that program. So go ahead and take it away, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Whenever I join this group, I always find it really interesting to see how versatile GIS can be, especially with how Sam was doing it to use it for like real science, which is different from what I'm going to show you, how we're going to use it. We use it primarily for data intake, specialized form creation and distribution and retention of that document. In addition, we use it for workload analysis and resource allocation. So I'm going to break a cardinal rule for presentations and just go with live demos, but I think it will make for a more interesting presentation for you guys to sit through. So I'm going to share my screen here with you. So to give you guys some perspective, the septic system program, we do more than just issue septic system permits, but we are by far the largest receiver of applications from the public. Last year in 2022, the calendar year, we received a total of 23,992 applications for service. That number is pretty staggering when you consider at this point in time in 2022, I think we had between 60 and 70 employees statewide. And this is a dashboard that I made here showing the highest and lowest 15 counties, and you can filter for all types of stuff, but just keep in mind the volume of workload that we have here. Back in 2021, though, I conducted a time analysis, and I just want to see how staff are spending their time. And it turned out that they were spending over 35,500 hours a year just figuring out where they needed to go and work they needed to do and tracking the work and reporting it once they were complete. So let's think about that too. Over 35,500 hours of just figuring out where to go before you do any work. So that was the equivalent of about 19 full-time employees doing absolutely nothing all year long. Or you could look at it as a $1.1 million worth of salary per year going to no productivity. So not only does this impact our bottom line, and it's an inefficiency in the system, which in part contributed to a very large backlog of work on our staff. And that has a negative feedback loop on them to where it impacts their morale, hard to retain them, and their work-life balance was out of whack. So I started developing some acceptance criteria for our new ESRI tools, and I solicited input from deputy directors, managers, program coordinators, field staff, and our very important admin team. And so in order to fully appreciate the new, I want to give you guys a perspective on where we currently are. So all of our applications come in online. They can pay for them online as well. And staff get a notification by email saying, hey, an application in this county has popped up. And so the typical day, staff will wake up, they'll go to this page here, and they will select the county or counties they work in. So we'll just do one for fun here. We'll just say Hardeman County, and they'll click on a status of an application. And here are all the applications that need to be worked in that county. So this one's a fairly light county. That's why I chose it. So they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 applications ready to be worked. So this portal was developed, I guess about 8, 9 years ago with STS, and it was when Bob Martineau was in charge of the program, and he said that by this date, I want X number of applications for TDEC to be available online. Well, the easiest way to do that would be for our program to do it. And therefore, you're getting over 20,000 applications online. So you're well surpassing his percentage request. And this is what they came up with. And it works fine for the time. It really met everything we needed. But now that times have changed and technology has evolved, we're starting to see some issues here. So for instance, it gives us a date, a name, a county, and it gives us an address. So unless you know the county like the back of your hand, it's really hard to plan out an efficient route for that day. So if you're new to the state or helping out in another county, you really don't know where to go. Which part of these, what's the best order to do these in? So people are taking these addresses and then they're putting them into another mapping tool, for instance, Google Maps or something to that effect, to kind of map out where they need to go. So that's eating a bunch of their time. Our staff will then go to the site. They'll use Survey 123 to issue a permit or a final inspection documentation. That automatically gets emailed to the customer, the environmental scientist, and it uploads to FileNet for permanent retention. So if you're not familiar with FileNet, it is just the clearinghouse for all data stored in the state. Everybody is going to eventually be on it if you're not already there. And it's simple search terms. It's just like a big file cabinet. So with our new enterprise system, though, when we switch over, staff are going to go to our enterprise page here. And you may notice, if you're in the know, that the TDEC branding is all over this with the special colors that you're supposed to use and everything. So we were really lucky to get that in there. And these are the main applications that staff are going to use. So first thing they do when they wake up and they get ready to go for their day, they're going to go to this dashboard here. And this is a little different than the previous talks that we've had. We're going to utilize a lot of dashboards in Survey 123 rather than mapping tools. So there's various filters off to the left, all the application data in the middle, and a map with a bunch of dots on it below it. Staff will have the ability to figure out where they need to go during the day through various exercises. So I'm just going to make it easy and make the map a little larger. And we're going to zoom in to, say, this county here. And as we zoom in, there we go, you'll notice that the dots spread out. And they're all color coded. So this is all test data. So it's been in here for a long time. But all these squares represent a location of where a service needs to be provided. Our statutes require that work get done in a certain amount of time. So as I make this bigger for you to see, we're going to have them all color coded, 0 to 10, 30, 40, 50, 45 days, and greater than 46 days. That's our limit of when we're supposed to get these things done. We have abbreviations for each type of request someone can have. I'm not a huge fan of the color scheme here, but the cartographer at ESRI convinced me that this color scheme was better than the one I wanted because it's favorable for people who are colorblind. I wanted the one that was more in line with radar reflectivity when you look at a radar map. But I went ahead and went with that. So this way, staff can see what area of the county they need to work in. And if their county starts to have fewer applications, they could see if there's some on the county line where they could go across and help their partner out. We also have the abilities, for instance, to select a county and it will zoom to it. It will filter this list here as well. Click on an application, it zooms to it. It tells you it's for a conventional permit. All the information you need over here is on the side. If you need to edit the application, if they made a mistake in it, we have the ability to edit it as well. So once staff figure out where to go, they will open up Survey 123. They'll go to their inbox and they will see which permits have been assigned to them. They will open it up. Information from the application the customer submitted will automatically populate the top of the application, as well as the location where they dropped a pin. All of our iPads have wireless connectivity, so they will actually be able to geolocate themselves in the field, and this pin will adjust as needed. We've also built in a lot of radio buttons and a lot of conditional formatting. So for instance, septic systems are designed based on number of bedrooms and how fast the soil absorbs water. So for instance, a 4-bedroom house requires a 1,000-gallon septic tank, which auto-populated. But if you go back up here and you change it to a 1-bedroom house, it drops it down to 750 gallons. We'll say a 45-minute soil rate requires 100 feet of field line. But let's say it's a 75-minute rate in a 5-bedroom house, it's going to automatically update it to 617. So that takes a little bit of time that the staff are spending determining the length of field line and the size of tank needed. And when you have this much work to do, every little bit helps to keep it consistent. Also, this reduces the errors that were produced previously. And if staff want to change this, they can, but they have to click the X button, then they can manually enter something else. But fat fingers is no longer going to be a problem for us. So various questions are also available to be filled out on the form. We have the ability to upload photographs through the camera on our iPad, or we can upload an image that we have saved on the iPad if we got a soil map or a survey from somebody. Once that is submitted, it will automatically email to the customer, the environmental scientist, and it will upload to FileNet as well. This was a big helper here. If someone decides that they made a mistake on the permit they issued, we currently don't have a real good way to go back and correct it. So this dashboard here will be specifically for that, for these particular services down here. Same thing, you can search it through any of these filters. You got your map here. And once this loads, this is all the data that was submitted through the survey. It copied it over here, and you have the ability to change anything you want. Leadership needs a lot of data going to them, and they need it in an easily digestible format. So for instance, one thing we get asked a lot is, how many applications did a specific field office receive over a certain amount of time? This is the dashboard that would be most useful for that. So it's going to have all applications that come into the state, and it's going to break it down by category and give you a trend line as well. And if you want to know more information about a specific one, so for here's permits, we can see that this is all test data again. There were 10,900 something permits issued during this time. A green arrow pointing up, meaning it's an increase from last year of 63% over the same time period. We also have a breakdown of permit by type. If we select a county, if we select an environmental field office, for instance, we'll go to Johnson City. It will also break it down by which counties received how many applications, the type of alternative system. So a whole bunch of information here, and this is really going to help leadership know where they need to allocate resources. If they have someone in one county that's not doing enough work, then they can push that over to another county and help the other people out. So we have this for all of our major services we provide. This is a summary stats dashboard. So the previous one was just for applications we received. This is showing work completed. So it breaks it down. This is kind of an ugly page. I know I can't make it any prettier, but this is all the work that we track and how many of what we do. And you can change it by staff member, over a time period, per county, or EFO. There's really a lot of ways you could break it down to see what's going on. So if we want to see permits, same story as with the previous one. Types of permits, the number of days it took to complete a permit. Like I said before, that needs to be a certain time period. If we choose the Chattanooga field office region, we can break it down by which county within that region has a number of permits when they came in, and again, for our final inspections and any other thing that we do. I notice a lot of people that are in these meetings are with Tennessee State Parks, so you may not appreciate this as much as other people, but we do receive a lot of complaints. It really boils down mostly just to a neighbor telling on another neighbor or something. So we have a mechanism in place to have complaints entered into this dashboard. It can be entered in by the field staff, management, leadership, commissioner's office can use it, or even our admin staff, if they get a call, they can enter a complaint record here. It goes to Waterlog, our official database for all of Division of Water Resources, and staff will get a notification that they need to work a complaint. So in a nutshell, this is it. Once it's out and ready to go, it will be the most advanced permit issuing and tracking system that TDEC has, and we're really proud about that. It took a long time to get here. We are looking at doing it. We did user testing once already. We are looking at doing a soft rollout, hopefully next month with a few select staff. And if all that goes well, then I'll be traveling across the state, educating each field office on how to use these tools. Eventually, we're going to use this data to create a public map where the public could just zoom into their house and click on a dot and pull up all the necessary documents instead of going to FileNet here, which after a couple of times the property is sold, the property owner when the system was installed is lost to history. Addresses sometimes change in these rural counties. So it can be easy to lose a permit record, after 15, 20 years of it. So I think that's about all I got for you. I think I went pretty fast, but yeah, we're really excited about getting these new tools available.
That's awesome. Great job, Steve. It's really impressive to see that type of enterprise solution being rolled out on that scale. That program is obviously doing a lot of work statewide. So I know it's probably one of those things that's hard to dive into when everything is so busy as far as the rest of the responsibilities for the program. But kudos to you guys for really revamping everything and looking to learn some lessons from what you guys have implemented, and hopefully being more of an enterprise solution for other programs in our division as well as the department.
Sure. If we can reduce staff time on those two items by 90%, our return on investment for the first year is going to be over 18%. So it's a pretty good argument to make.
Steve, can you give us kind of an idea about how big of a project this is, like the scale of the resources that are involved as far as like your position, as well as contracting through third parties and STS resources?
Sure.
I don't know
Sure.
what you can say to kind of give us a framework for that.
Sure, it's massive actually. We've contracted with ESRI and we've contracted with STS. This has taken up approximately 85-90% of every day. There's a lot of meetings that go on. There's a lot of testing. There's a lot of back and forth. STS, the people that I work with there, they have a project manager on their side as well. They've been great. ESRI's been great. It has gone longer than we wanted, but the original rollout date was very ambitious in my opinion. So I'm okay with where we are. But yeah, it's a massive undertaking. And then also recruiting staff and having them be able to devote enough time to testing what was a real challenge too. I think I had about 40 people say they were interested in testing, and maybe 8 to 12 really gave it a good go. But that was understandable as well with their daily workload that they had to keep up with.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks for that perspective. And just, one of the things that I find fascinating as we move into the future and as we're trying to kind of transfer into electronic formats and all these sorts of things is that, our department has mainly functioned around, and I'll give the example from our division, we've historically been thought of, permit writers or field staff that do a certain type of job. And I just find it very interesting how positions like yours as well as others are needed for that true data science side of the field, because we've not really wrapped our arms around this data. And when you really start to do that, not only are you trying to kind of create this database architecture and all of these other sorts of things, but then you start to realize how much data needs to be cleaned up to afford the types of analysis that you're doing in dashboards and that sort of thing. So kind of the other aspect of data cleanup that goes into that. But I just find it really interesting that have how we have historically been aligned with hiring a certain type of employee, and these data science needs are really being elevated into a whole different way of looking at data and a whole different need for how we're organizing ourselves.
Yeah, so I started off in the field as well, and just over the years promoted up, and then this position I'm in opened up, and we had to come up with a solution for the program. But you were talking about data management. That was something that I really struggled with, and anybody who is looking at taking on a major project like this, it really deserves a lot of consideration and thought about balancing data integrity with freedom of the staff to do the work they need to do. I mean, you saw there where if you put in the number of bedrooms, it's going to fill in the septic tank size automatically. That one's okay, but we could have done that with a lot of other stuff too, but it would have really tied the hands of the staff when they need special situations. So it was a real struggle, real balance in my head. Which ones do I make conditional? Which ones do I make open fields? So a lot of consideration goes into that. And not to say this, but there is a lot of backdoor coding that goes on, and buying servers, and how fast do these servers need to be able to process data? How many times you want a batch upload of the data from survey 123 to go to FileNet? I mean, there's so much stuff that we don't think about as users, and that's really what you want. You want it to be as seamless as possible for the end user. So they call it user experience. And I just had to learn a whole bunch about that as well. Not just about getting the data in, but also the user experience. A lot to think of too.
Yeah, all great points, Steve. Anybody else have any other questions? I have one more, but I don't want to steal the floor. It looks like I see somebody's hand up. Or yeah, go ahead, whoever was.
I have a
Go.
question. You mentioned in the beginning of the presentation that about Martineau, and saying that you all need to develop this intake system for getting the applications in for the septic applications. Is that system still being used, or when you went over to this ESRI product or applications, you changed whatever it was you were using for intake to their system from the original?
Oh, that's a good question, Pamela. So during this process, I found out that ESRI does not handle money. So if you want to have people be able to pay online, ESRI cannot build you a product that will accept money. So we are still using the original one. It has some tweaks to it that STS developed for us initially. So that's working pretty well. So we're keeping that.
What was that original system that you're using?
Let me show you.
Yeah, what is that? What is the system that you're using for intake? Is that the MyTDEC? Okay.
No, it's not my TDEC forms. It was a custom build for the septic service request. I love it when a robot asks me to prove I'm not a robot. That always tickles me. So this is it here. It's available online. If you Google septic system permit Tennessee, you'll probably get this page here. But STS built this custom for us to take in applications.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yep, and I believe that was built on the .NET framework, if I remember correctly. Is that right, Steve? Yep.
I believe you're correct.
Awesome.
I think I saw
Well, we've got all-
Stacy on here. Stacy Apple was heavily involved. I think she was on this call or this meeting here a second ago.
Yeah, I believe I did see that. We've got one question in the chat. Are the records tied into Metro Davidson County? And then we've got one with Dylan up next.
Sure. So that's a good question too. No, there are 8 counties in Tennessee that run their own septic system program, and they're typically the counties that have their own health department that's really big and active in their area. So Memphis, Davison, There's a bunch over there by Knoxville, Hamilton, Chattanooga, that area. So the larger cities typically have their own septic system programs that they run.
Awesome. And then Dylan, if you want to come off mute.
Yeah, Steve, I recall working in water, and you had kind of were the wizard of some really incredible spreadsheets that did all kinds of cool calculations. So it's cool to see the evolution of that into this.
I promise I'm not a dork, you guys. I am cool. I'm fun to be around.
But actually, my question. So we saw ESRI Survey 123. We saw ESRI dashboards. We saw FileNet. Could you name, I think there are some other ESRI platforms that you showed. I don't know, some of these are custom builds, but would you, so let's just say on the ESRI side, Survey 123 dashboards, could you comment if it's like Hub or Portal or whatever other Experience Builder, whatever the other things are?
Yeah, so currently we use Survey 123 and we use something called field maps. We're going to get away from field maps because ESRI had the Survey 123 has evolved into something that we no longer need the functionality of field maps. Survey 123 can do it. So that's just one less thing that staff have to deal with. We are currently using GIS Online for all of our licensing, but we are going to switch over to an enterprise account. I don't really know the difference between the two. I know they come with different credentials and things you can do, but for what we need with our staff, they're all going to need an enterprise account. So we are just going to use, this was built with, think Experience Builder. I think this site here was, and these are just links here that staff will use to get to a dashboard. So we're really breaking it down to just 3 ESRI products, I believe now. Survey 123, dashboard, and this page here.
Awesome.
But there are a lot of connections to emails, FileNet, Waterlog, payment processing that goes through FIS, that goes through the website Pamela and I were talking about. So there's a lot of data connections out there too.
Awesome work, Steve. Does anybody else have any other questions? All right. Yeah, thank you all so much. Those were 2 awesome presentations coming from kind of different ends of the spectrum. You guys did an awesome job presenting that information and kind of showing. It looks like we might have had a hand up still. Or was that just a relic from before? If you have a question, feel free to come off mute and interrupt me if you'd like. Awesome. One other quick thing is I was noticing the comment from Steve about the color blindness, and I did see an announcement recently for Pro is that I'll go ahead and share my screen real quick. For you that are interested, there is a color vision simulator now in Arc Pro so that you can simulate the different types of color blindness with regard to the symbology that you're using. And then you can kind of tweak that symbology to be of preference for those types of people that might have color blindness. So just an interesting thing. I used to have a boss that was colorblind in a previous life. And so we would bring him maps and he would always say, well, I can't tell the difference. So just an interesting note there from the conversation previously.
Yeah, and Brian, I'll add to that. One of the initiatives that Leah and I are doing with our state park maps is trying to assign a value of like different percents to everything that's on our state park map. So like the darker things are the most important highways and symbols. And then the least important things like contours are like the lowest value. So there's like you create a value hierarchy of colors. And it's just pretty cool to think through that. So if it is, even if it's printed out in black and white, in grayscale, if a park runs out of color printing, just to be focused on that. We got a bunch of park managers and rangers that are colorblind, and now we're starting to think about how do we symbolize our trails differently. Do we need to do things besides color to assign these to our trails, shapes in different sizes of patterns and things like that? some parks do that. It's a funky system, and I think ESRI has made some new base maps as well that add pattern in things to water features and to parks and things like that, so that they stand out from what's urban areas and things. So yeah, really cool things for accessibility that are coming online now.
Awesome. Very cool. So the next section for discussion is just about data stewardship. We've talked about this the past couple of meetings. We're going to be engaging again with the power users in different program areas to provide input on the features that we have, as we were discussing earlier about the TDEC GIS SDE database. So we have a spreadsheet on our SharePoint site. If you need access to that SharePoint site, let us know. And so we're just trying to gain information about, creating a catalog, essentially, a more robust catalog that explains what the feature name is in the GIS SDE database, as well as kind of the department that is responsible for stewarding that data, the division, any notes, the data steward name, potentially comments, just trying to get better information and try to even build some metadata that might be able to be incorporated into these different layers on our SDE database. So reach directly out to Andrew and myself. I've had a few people reach out from the past couple of meetings, and we're just trying to make sure that we include everybody in the discussion and to make sure that we're engaging everyone for input on this. So feel free to reach out to either one of us on that topic. And then I'm going to swap slides here. The TDEC resources, I believe that we highlighted this quickly last meeting. We have some people that kind of aren't able to attend every time. Wanted to highlight this again as far as Tennessee specific geographic data. This is the clearinghouse that we built from the Tennessee Geographic Information Council. So some volunteers from that organization, including myself and some, as well as Dylan and others, and Andrew from our department, collaborated to put together this set of data collections for GIS purposes in Tennessee. So if you haven't checked out tngis.org yet, make sure to check out that URL. A lot of different data collections for many different purposes. And so including the Smart Parks Hub site as well, and TDEC Division of Water Resources data hub. So check out all of those. If you're not familiar with it, or if you're needing data, go ahead and make sure to favorite that. It's one thing that I use all the time. Anything else on that, Andrew?
Nope, looks good to me.
Perfect. Yeah, and then upcoming trainings. There is a upcoming massive open online course, and they just call them MOOCs from ESRI. So that's the term for, or the acronym for, the massive open online courses. These are completely free courses. You'll be able to see the MOOCs prices here. So I believe that they do end up listing some as well for paid, but you can always see which ones are free. And then also in my ESRI trainings, you can also get specific trainings for different types of things. So like we were talking about when Steve was talking about all the different components that kind of build into his workflow, and Dylan was mentioning that you can look for the specific types of whether it's a portion of field maps or whether it's another program area within ESRI products, you can get specific training on those. So feel free to use that hyperlink to get to additional free trainings. Upcoming events, the TDEC I was just mentioning is the Tennessee's Geographic Information Council. The fall forums are a great opportunity to come out and network with these users, learn new stuff, or even present to the GIS community. Here are the dates statewide. So we have different fall forums for the different areas within the state, west, east, and middle. So these are the dates for each of those fall forums, as well as the location. If you're in Middle Tennessee, come join us down at the Fleming Training Center on October 19th. And there are the other locations as well for west and east in Paris, Tennessee, and in Chattanooga, Tennessee. The ESRI UC was a couple weeks ago, and I attended along with Leah from Parks. I gave a presentation for what we're doing with GIS and source water protection. If you guys might have seen Rebecca Ransom give a presentation on this project previously. So we had a lot of good feedback in our presentation. The room was packed. It was really, really cool to hear from users on an international spectrum, just their interest in the project and learning, looking to learn some more about how we're using that GIS data to protect drinking water sources in the state of Tennessee. So not only is it a great place to learn about folks that are doing similar types of work as you are, but also just, like we were talking about, all these different intricate programs that ESRI has for products and services. All of the subject matter experts from ESRI are there, so you can directly talk to these people and troubleshoot things and get answers to questions and just learn about the latest and greatest that's coming along. One of the really cool things that I was picking up on when I was there was just a lot of the new capabilities of Experience Builder to do new and fun things. Another thing that really caught my eye was building tasks within ArcPro and being able to customize those tasks to different workflows. I think that could be something that would be applicable to our business processes, to be able to, actually come into ArcPro and formalize a tool that would say, select the different permits. And then after you select those permits, it would kind of go on into individual workflows that would be specific to your processes. So that's pretty cool. And then another thing that I've over the past year is just their suitability modeler, kind of that question that you were asking earlier, Andrew, of Sam, of like, what would all the data sets be that you would throw into some sort of analysis like that? Their suitability modeler tools are really making it more user friendly. A lot of that type of modeling was previously reserved to people that really had a whole lot more either programming skills or were incorporating other add-ons and plugins into ArcPro. And so those tools are coming to other users and being made more available with ease of use within ArcPro directly, as well as web app builder. So there's some new suitability modeling widgets within Experience Builder as well. And just like a great place to network, meet new folks. I met the guy who runs EPA Echo. It was just a great place to meet new people and talk about new ideas and learn new things.
I was gonna ask Leah to share a little bit too about her experience, and I was going to add too, like that there was a virtual option for the ESRI UC. And what my takeaway was is that during COVID they had a virtual option in which there was a ton of content all the time. You could stay busy watching presentations like Brian because it was being broadcasted from his office or things like that. There seems to be a little bit less offerings virtually now, but they do have a basics for everything, like intro to field maps, intro to dashboards. And if you've ever gone on YouTube and seen like these really nice like 45-minute or half-hour recordings from ESRI, a lot of those are from the user conference, or there are different like regional conferences. So keep an eye out on YouTube in the next couple months, because you might see a lot of the content from the ESRI UC start to show up there. So a basic one they usually do is like, what's new in Survey 123? What's new in field maps, where they recap any of the new releases from the last couple months. So there should be videos popping up in the next month or two on ESRI's YouTube channel for recordings. But yeah, Leah, did you have any thoughts on what your experience was at the ESRI UC too? Anything you learned?
Yeah, like Andrew and Brian mentioned, going to the UC has almost become critical if you use a lot of ESRI software just to keep up with what's new and up and coming. Some of the fun things that I found that are going to be life-changing for me were Field Maps Designer now has an option to save your smart form to the layer itself. So no matter if you're opening that form in Map Viewer or Experience Builder Editor or another field map, that same form is already set for you. That's going to save me so much time. ArcGIS Online is about to come out with a restore item option. So if you ever accidentally delete something, hopefully that will help you out. And then in Map Viewer, you can now symbolize points with custom SVG icons. So like logos, or a lot of our Tennessee State Park icons are custom. That's going to help us a lot in our web apps. And then now Map Viewer has analysis tools. So you don't have to go back and use the old Map Viewer Classic, which is great. I also really enjoyed presentations from UT Chattanooga on their Tennessee River map that's about to be released. There was an awesome Lake Tahoe boating app, and I really enjoyed the Utah Parks web map that has 360 video footage of remote roads so visitors know what to expect before they get out into the middle of nowhere. So really cool user presentations just to get your brain turning and get excited to come back and do it for your own work.
Awesome. I'm so excited to see all the stuff that you pulled from that. Take us to the next level. I'm excited that we got to have you out there this year.
Yeah, that's great feedback, Leah. I know I was in a room where they were talking about the SVGs for the symbology as well, and I think the whole room was like, ooh, ah. So I know a lot of people had been waiting on that. It was one of the things that I first identified in Pro when they had first come in. You couldn't like parse over to a multi-patch initially, but which they later incorporated. But yeah, that some really good feedback there. So if you're not aware, it's like a massive conference. It's over 20,000 people, and just a very immersive experience for learning and networking. And as Andrew mentioned, thank you, Andrew, for outlining all those opportunities for remote viewing, and as well as the sessions that'll be cached on YouTube and ESRI resources as well. So just to segue to a big thank you to our presenters today. Really appreciate you guys presenting those very important projects. Please reach out to Andrew and myself if you have ideas for upcoming presentations. We're always looking for another person to come and talk about how you're implementing GIS in your program. So please reach out to us. We already have some ideas, but we want to make sure and incorporate everyone's idea and work, and gain the perspectives of everybody. So that would be awesome if you just reach out to us with new ideas, and it doesn't have to be anything lengthy. It can be something short. As you've seen previously, we do lightning talks and longer presentations as well. So anything small or large, we're glad to have you share your perspective and your experience with the larger group. We have the SharePoint page where you'll see a lot of the recordings from these previous meetings, as well as other resources that we've provided there for folks. We also have that metadata page on the SharePoint, so you can populate that or get an idea about what we're trying to accomplish with that kind of catalog of resources for the SDE. TDEC.org provides a lot of information and the platform to engage with that community, as well as there's the TDEC.org website for the clearinghouse of data in the state. And so you would just replace that C with an S instead. We also reference out to the hub site from the TDEC.org website as well. And then the State Parks GIS YouTube channel. Andrew was kind of paging through some of those resources earlier, but you guys have done a phenomenal job of outlining how, different use cases and how to incorporate those tools. So thanks for providing that link as well. And Andrew, do you think we have anything else, or are we about ready to wrap up here? We can close by 3 o'clock, it looks like.
Yeah, that all sounds great. I love Sam and Steve. Your presentations today were awesome. Really, really inspiring. I'm psyched. We'll probably be reaching out to both of you to get some more ideas. It's really fun. I hope we can keep branching out and seeing more GIS users from other parts of TDEC. Please invite everyone that you can think of. If they've never been in one of these meetings before, we'd love to grow. It's fun to see our kind of participant base grow a little bit. So thank you guys each for taking the time this week to come. I know we kind of do this on a quarterly schedule, but starting to recognize some faces, and it's a great way to connect and keep inspired. We've got a nice community here in TDEC, and you're all doing really cool work. So definitely reach out when you have projects coming up. They don't have to be ready right this second. Maybe you're saying, hey, we're going to launch something in 6 months from now. Keep us on your mind to reach out, and we'd love to have you share some things. And even if it's just like process, like, okay, we've launched this tool 3 months in, how's it working for us? Did it save us time? What are some of the hiccups, things we teach other people about if we did it differently? But yeah, thank you all for coming today. We'll stay on the line for another couple minutes and stuff. If anyone has anything else they'd want to share or questions. But yeah, thank you, Brian, for running the show today, and all you guys for participating.